Everything that we do, from our customer evaluations to the technology that we build to the roadmaps that we have, everything converges with one thing in mind, and that's to serve you, the customer.
Sharewell provides enterprise power without the cost and complexity.
I've got a system that I can customize with little training.
Never have to write a line of code and never need a developer level resource to touch the tool.
Having this portal and being able to integrate it with our existing SharePoint sites and being able to provide on-demand reports and searches.
Anything that you can conceive of that you need to automate and integrate, you can build.
Within days of receiving the product, it was plugged into our virtual environment.
It's a game changer.
Most of our competition, you'll find out, is built on old legacy technology.
We can get you up and running as quickly as possible, and yet you'll never outgrow us.
Our software and our technology was built on the latest, most innovative technology available today.
Whether you have it on-premise and bring it into our hosted environment, or take it from our hosted environment and bring it on-premise, it doesn't matter.
It's about people at Sharewell. It's in the relationships that we build.
At the end of the meeting, he turned to me and he says, "You guys have got the deal." And I said, "Well, why? What made the difference?" And he says, "It's the way Sharewell treated us."
We don't get it right every time. We listened, we identified the problem, and then we worked through the solution together.
You need to be worried about your legacy. Your legacy is based upon the tools and the people that you employ and how cost effective and what the quality is. So keeping this simple and not expensive and easy to maintain saves you a lot.
Hello, my name is Mark Fay from Sharewell Software. We're a proud sponsor of TFT 2014, bringing great ITSM content to the world. Please enjoy this next presentation.
Hi, I'm Karen Ferris, a director at Mercanta Consulting, which is an Australian, Melbourne-based service management consultancy company. But like many of the speakers in the last couple of hours, I'm sitting in a hotel room in Las Vegas, attending the TFT14 conference. I also have the privilege or the luxury, I guess, of being the last speaker for this session of TFT14. So just a quick introduction to my presentation, and we'll get straight into it. This presentation about IT service management tool selection was initially delivered as a keynote at the ITSM Australia National Conference. And I had a little bit of concern about the presentation being not particularly maybe new in terms of the subject matter or the content about how to go around selecting or when to select a service management tool. However, the feedback that I got post the presentation, people were saying things like, "I wish we'd heard that 2 years ago. People in my organization really need to hear those messages." So hopefully you'll get the same value out of it that those people did. So without any further ado, I'll share my screen. So the title, as you can see, is IT Service Management Monopoly, because it's my belief that so many people undertake IT service management tool selection like a game of chance. So for many organizations, selecting an IT service management tool is like a game of Monopoly. And this is evident by the number of organizations that replace a service management technology within 2 to 3 years of purchase. So how many times are they going to keep passing go, only to find that each time they do, they end up in jail with a no get out of jail free card? So this presentation aims to save organizations time and money by ensuring that when you're considering tool replacement, they make sure that they really need a different tool. So I'm going to tell you when to play the game. And secondly, when a new tool is required, that the organization undertakes the necessary pre-work to ensure that the selected tool meets the current and future needs of the business. So not only will I tell you when to play the game, I'm also going to try and tell you how to play the game. So this is our IT Service Management Monopoly board. Now, I have a major disclaimer to make at this point. The placement of the IT service management tools on the board does not correlate with the monetary value of the properties in the actual monopoly game. So we'll get that one out of the way. So most organizations start on the go square with little or no preparation. And they're faced with a plethora of available tools to choose from, just like the mass of properties you see on the monopoly board. They've no idea of when to play the game, i.e., do I really need a replacement tool? And how to play the game, and to make sure they shop on the right side of the street. The possibilities that following the tool selection, they could land on chance, turn over a card, and the card says that the service management tool requires integration with an existing CRM tool, and they discover the tool does not have that capability. So selecting a service management tool should not be a roll of the dice. As I've said, this presentation aims to equip you with the steps that are needed to ensure you really do need to change, and the steps to be taken to ensure that the right tool at the right price and at the right time is selected that meets the needs of the business. This benefits both the buyer and the vendor. The vendor doesn't have their tool dispatched in a couple of years purely because the organization hadn't got the requirements right, and the buyer will get a return on investment. So as I've said, given that regular tool replacement is a recurring theme in the service management industry, it's time to change the approach. It's time to be a game winner and not a loser, and it's time to stop trading one tool for another. So this presentation aims to be your get out of jail free card. The next time you pass go, you can make sure that you do collect the money. So many organizations not only play IT service management tool selection like a game of Monopoly, but also start the game for all the wrong reasons. I hear so many organizations blaming the technology for the failure of IT service management. They give no consideration to the fact that the processes were poorly designed and did not meet the needs of the business. And that even the best technology solution in the world is not going to make your poor process a good one. No consideration is given to the fact that insufficient training has been given to people in the use of the tool, and therefore they're not utilizing it at all or are using it ineffectively. And no consideration is given to the fact that it was a lack of poor planning and preparation in tool selection in the first place that led to selection of a solution that does not meet the current and future needs of the business. It's just too easy to point the finger at the technology and the vendor and to start the game all over again and again and just keep repeating it every 2 to 3 years. This is just throwing money away unnecessarily, money that could be spent where it's really needed, on service improvement, for example. So let's explore some of the real drivers for IT service management tool replacement. If you're thinking about replacing the tool, are they the real drivers to do that? So outdated technology. This has to be one of the most compelling reasons to migrate to a new IT service management solution. And this is that the technology currently being used is outdated. This means that the technology is not moved with the times and cannot support the service improvement initiatives that are being required by the business. The incumbent solution could be homegrown, and whilst it met some basic needs at the time of it being built, it's now not able to support the growing requirements, or it could be cost prohibitive to further develop the solution to meet the business requirements. But the outdated technology may not be a homegrown solution, but it could be one provided by a third-party vendor. And it could be the vendor that's not subjected their solution to continual improvement and development that's going to meet the growing needs of its user base and keeping pace with industry trends. Therefore, the organization suddenly finds itself unable to implement new processes and services due to the antiquated technology. The limitations could be endless, but some common ones organizations may come across today is a lack of integration between the processes, lack of integration with other systems, including CRM and ERP offerings, absence of social and collaboration capabilities, limited or no knowledge management facility, absence of a customer self-help and portal service, and no provision of comprehensive service portfolio and service catalog management. Maintenance costs. Many organisations may find that the maintenance cost for their current solution is unacceptable. If the organisation finds that staff are spending considerable, if not dedicated time, to correcting faults in the delivered solution, or to change attributes as they're not working per the specification, or to try and improve performance in order to uplift service delivery and adapt the solution to meet changing requirements, then it's time to migrate. Administration overhead. Most IT service management solutions do require some level of administration to change parameters, configure access privileges, maybe configure email and SMS notifications, amend service level targets based on priorities or business services. However, for most small to medium-sized organisations, this should only really be a part-time or full-time role for one person. If administration has become a full-time job for a large number of people, it's likely that the solution does not integrate with services such as Active Directory to acquire personnel details and security principles, doesn't integrate with services such as SAP to acquire contract and billing information, or the vendor does not support the solution with remote administration services. So not only is this an unwanted overhead for the organisation, it's also a costly one. Over customization. This is the biggie. The chosen IT service management solution should be one that generally delivers the majority of your requirements out of the box. If the organisation has a solution that's required major customization to meet its needs, this is going to cause a major headache and a lot of money. There's a difference between configuration and customization. Configuration requires no change to the source code. The selected solution should meet 80% or more of the requirements and should be able to be configured to address the other needs without changes to source code. Not only is a full-blown customization costly at the outset, it's also costly to undertake upgrades, as all of the customization will have to be reapplied. The same scenario applies if the organisation itself has been allowed or able to customize. Us IT folk are renowned for wanting to tinker with technology, and if they've been allowed to do this and highly customize what was initially delivered, upgrades are going to be costly, time-consuming, and risky. Version lock. Many organisations can find themselves in a version lock situation where the complexity of the upgrade path to the next version of the solution, the time it will take to upgrade, and the associated cost make it difficult to justify. In this situation, IT will find they're stuck with an outdated solution and unable to support the changing business requirements. They're unable to benefit from new features that the solution could potentially offer. I know of organisations that are in version lock because the upgrade is going to cost as much, if not more, than the initial purchase and implementation expenditure. It's going to be more cost effective to move to a new IT service management solution that offers an easy upgrade process without manual re-implementation of any configurations. This process should take a matter of hours, not weeks or months. Many of the complex upgrades are because the solution is not actually a single service management solution, but a myriad of different modules for each IT service management process that have been brought together by the vendor over time. Upgrades may need to upgrade each module in a particular order one by one to establish the required integration points. This not only increases the cost and the time to upgrade, but also introduces risk and the possibility of failure. Even if organisations have been prepared to undertake these complex and costly upgrades in the past, it might be time to consider migration to avoid repeating the same exercise next time, which just increases your total cost of ownership of the solution, removes any return on investment, and consumes expenditure that could be used elsewhere on service improvement. In addition to version lock, There's also vendor lock. This is where the organisation feels trapped by their current vendor and feels the only easy way forward is to update to a newer version of the current tool. Fears of a long and difficult migration path to an alternative tool, the need for extensive data conversion and cleansing, and the time and investment that need to be spent in customization of process flows and integration with other systems can lead the organisation to limit their migration options. This can entrench the same old poorly designed processes and restrict the organisation's opportunities to identify the best solution for their requirements. Organisations that have carefully selected a new solution and planned and prepared for the migration can demonstrate that these fears are unfounded. If the organisation is in vendor lock due to unjustified fears or concerns, then it's time to seriously examine them and consider migration to a solution that will be a long-term investment and meet both the current and future needs of the business. Inflexibility. Another reason, a right reason for migration, could be the inflexibility of the incumbent solution. As we all know, the IT service management industry is constantly changing, and in recent years we've seen the emergence of vendors offering on-site or software-as-a-service solutions, giving customers more flexibility regarding hosting. The business is also rapidly changing, and IT needs to be agile and able to respond to those changing needs. If the IT service management solution is not able to support the rapidly changing requirements, IT will be unable to respond. These new requirements could include increased end-user capability through the provision of portal services and increased business and IT capability through a knowledge management capability integrated with proprietary knowledge packs and supporting knowledge-centered support methodology. If the current IT service management solution is not flexible enough to support these new requirements in a timely and cost-effective manner, it is time to migrate to an ITSM solution that can. Solution sunsetting. Another reason for migration may be due to the vendor sunsetting its solution or a version of its solution. It can often be that the vendor supports many solutions, not just IT service management, and many versions of those solutions. And in times of financial constraint, they may look to reduce the number of solutions and or the versions that they support. If a solution is being withdrawn, the organisation may be forced into an upgrade to a new version or an alternative solution with the same vendor and within a time frame that they dictate, as this may have been mandated in the contract. This would be a good time to consider a migration, and even more so if there's been extensive customization. Any vendor that forces an upgrade on their customer within a time frame that suits the vendor should be treated with caution. Even if the solution is a reasonable one, it might be time to change vendor and find one that supports one IT service management solution and is focused on the needs of the customer. And finally, poor support. If you're getting poor support from your vendor, then it could be time, or maybe should be time, to change the one that meets your support needs. If support is poor or unresponsive, then it could be time to migrate to a vendor with better customer service. So they are all reasonable reasons, if you like, to migrate to a new solution. So if you are looking to move to a new IT service management tool, just ask yourself, are we doing so for the right reasons? So we've looked at when to play. Now I'd like to look at how to play. So if we've ensured that we are really replacing our IT service management solution for the right reasons, how do we make sure that before we start the game, we know how to play and ensure that when we pass go, we really do collect the money? Frankly, there is no shortcut. Careful planning and preparation is required. This is a significant investment for the organisations in terms of finances, time and resources. Therefore, we need to get it right first time and not end up with an ITSM solution that does not meet the needs of the business now and into the future. We should not treat selection of an IT service management tool as a game of chance and leave it to a roll of the dice. As we can see from the Monopoly board we saw earlier, it's on the screen now, there's lots of IT service management tools to choose from, and there's a lot more than is demonstrated here. So how can we be sure we're selecting the right one that's going to meet our needs? Well, firstly, know what it is you want. What is it that you need? All of those things that you can see on the screen at the moment will get you from A to B. But which is going to be best suited to meet the needs of your organisation now and into the future? You need to identify all of your stakeholders and gather their requirements. Stakeholders will include IT staff, business personnel, and third-party providers. It'll include senior management and executive staff, as well as operational personnel. They all need to be involved, albeit at different levels of involvement in specifying their requirements, as well as in the selection process. What you don't want to happen is you select a solution that meets the needs of most of the stakeholders, only to find that it's not possible to provide the reporting required by the CFO because you forgot to ask them. You're also more likely to encounter resistance to the change that you're trying to bring about from stakeholder groups who are not involved to some extent in the requirements gathering and the selection process. The other thing in regards to knowing what you want is, are you looking for a total service management solution? And by that I mean, do you want a solution that will support all 26 ITIL v3 processes? That might be a requirement, and that's fine. Or will a subset of those processes meet the needs of the business? Remembering it's the needs of the business now and into the future. We need to determine, will the solution need to integrate with other technologies and applications, such as enterprise resource planning, ERP, or customer relationship management, CRM tools? You need to determine all of those requirements as well. What can you afford? That's the big question, isn't it? When starting to select IT service management tools, you should get an idea of what your budget is. Do some market research, talk to other people, and determine what you think the average price range of the service management tools that are out there that are going to probably meet your needs. So this might be just based on some high-level requirements, but it'll give you a sense of the market and where you're likely to going to be playing within that market. So we need to understanding whether there's going to be financial constraints is going to have an impact on your specification of requirements that you're eventually going to put forward. It also might mean that you need to make a business case for an increase in the budget that's going to be allocated to the purchase of the tool. If you're going to want to have to fund a solution that meets all the business requirements. So work out what part of the pricing you're playing in. And what features do you need? On the board there, we've got some of the latest Monopoly games, the regular one, and Monopoly Travel. So what features do you need the tool to provide? Do you need a tool that provides a portal to allow end users to log and track their own incidents and service requests? Do you need the solution to include discovery tools to populate a federated configuration management system from numerous locations, such as HR systems, financial applications, and so on? Do you require a self-populating knowledge management system to underpin all of the other service management processes? These are really important questions you have to ask. It's then important to determine the mandatory and optional, that is the nice to have, criteria when you're gathering and collating your requirements. Mandatory criteria are those for which there is no alternative option, and optional criteria are those that are not going to be critical to your selection. This is a critical activity when you're creating your specifications of requirements for the service management tool. Based on your needs, you need to clearly determine the mandatory criteria on which selection will take place. If any of the solutions out there does not meet all of your mandatory criteria, then it will not make the shortlist. This is the criterion on which you have no room to move. The optional criteria are what will determine the preferred solution from the short list of vendors who meet all of your mandatory criteria. A good approach, and I'll show an example in a moment, a good approach is to weight your optional criteria, maybe on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is highly desirable and 1 was not so desirable, not so necessary, if you like. When vendors meet this optional criterion, they can then be scored accordingly. Therefore, a vendor that meets the more highly desirable criteria will receive a higher score than one that meets the less desirable. So, for example, provision of a live chat facility may be a nice to have, but it's low on the needs of the organisation and could be given a weighting of 1. Whereas the option to have self-help facilities for end users is not mandatory, but it is highly desirable. And therefore, that would be given a weighting of 5. So what you're seeing now is a very simple, and yours will probably be a little more detailed and complex than this, hopefully. But it's just trying to show you an example that allows easy comparison of vendor responses to a specification of requirements. So where the vendor has indicated that they can meet the specified criteria, the relevant box is marked with a yes. So mandatory self-populating knowledge, vendor said yes. Then we have optional live chat, self-help and discovery tools. The vendor said yes, they can meet live chat and they can do self-help, but the organisation has a weighting. Self-help portal is really important, highly desirable. Live chat, nice to have, gets a weighting of 1. And you can see in the column on the extreme right how that scoring then accumulates. And this allows you to put vendors side by side and see how the scores actually come out. So for all vendors that meet mandatory criteria, you can then assess them on the optional criteria. Location, location, location. An important consideration in any solution selection is whether it's going to be on-premise or SaaS solution. And there's pros to cons to both. I'm not going to go into great detail on the pros and cons, that could be the whole of the presentation. But an on-premise solution gives you control over all of your systems and data. Your corporate data is stored and handled internally. You've got dedicated staff and support and maintenance. And it's an initial investment that's high but can pay off over time. A SaaS solution means you have no infrastructure costs, e.g. servers, and it's a low cost for service, and the third party is doing all the hard work. So there's no right solution, it just depends on what your requirements are. Some solution providers offer both, and you should explore that as well, because if that's a requirement. So you might want to choose one solution initially and then move to another later. If the vendor does offer both hosting options, determine what's involved in that move from on-premise to SaaS or vice versa. It really is down to your requirements. Room for growth. So when you're determining your requirements, you not only need to think about what you need today, but what you're going to need into the future. A fully integrated configuration management system, a CMS, might not be on your immediate horizon, but it might be something you're going to need to do in the longer term if you want to improve the capability of all your other service management processes. Wherever possible, your requirements should include the ability to grow without having to look at alternative solutions. It's also a good idea to do some market research on what's new what's trending and what's new in the industry, in regards to service management tools. Determine what the trends are and ensure that the vendors you're talking to or that you're thinking of choosing are keeping up with the latest innovations. Today, the use of social media and integration with social media channels is trending in service management, in the service management industry. Again, whilst this might not be a requirement for you today, you don't want to get left behind. If this becomes a standard for most service management tools, you don't want to get left with a tool that doesn't or can't incorporate this capability. Your service management team and end users may soon become disgruntled with a technology that's not been able to keep pace with its competitors, and you could soon find yourselves going back to market for a replacement. Vendor credentials. It's not only important to specify the requirements of the technology from a process perspective, but it's also important to specify the requirements of the vendor. Your requirements of the vendor should include what's their financial stability, do they have a sizable customer base, the ability to provide you with references of implementations in similar organizations. You need to find out about their implementation and support capability, project management experience, and so on. Timeframes should be questions you're asking of the vendor in your requirements documentation. This should include how long is an average implementation and how long it would have taken an organization of your size. And it should include how frequent are the upgrades and how long do upgrades take to apply. And also ask questions about response times to support requests and the hours of support availability. Make sure you understand the true cost of the solution. This should include project and implementation costs, training costs, support costs, license costs, any cost that may be involved in upgrades. You don't want unexpected surprises down the line. So once you have all of your requirements and your questions, you can document them in a specification of requirements and formulate a request for information, an RFI, or a request for proposal, an RFP. Again, I don't have time here today to go into the detail of what an RFI and RFP format looks like, but make sure it reflects your specific requirements and it's circulated to all stakeholders for feedback and ensures their continuing involvement. And one thing I will say at this point in regards to your RFP, do not regurgitate ITIL. Vendors hate you for it, and it's time consuming for you. You just need to ask the question, does your tool support the incident management process as per ITIL v3 2011? You don't need to ask questions about, can I have numerous incident statuses? Can I have a status that's pending before closure? Can I have different priorities on incidents? I see so many RFPs with that level of detail. It's just painful for you and it's painful for the vendor. So having issued your RFI or your RFP, how do we go about selecting the right solution? So based on your research, as I said, the issue of your requirements, you can shortlist the potential tools that will meet your needs. This then gives you a select number of vendors to whom you can issue a formal RFP. And you want to narrow them down to, I'd say, 2 or 3. Because once you've got your responses, you're going to look at references and presentations, and that's going to take time. And you don't want to be doing that for 10 or 15 vendors. The responses to the RFP are also going to be very detailed. So you're likely to have a large number of requirements that each vendor is going to respond to. You're going to have to look at those responses carefully and compare them with each other. So all of this takes time and effort, so keep the number of vendors engaged to a minimum. As part of the RFI-RFP process, ask the vendors to supply you with references for other organisations that have implemented their solution. And when talking to these organisations, not only ask them what they think of the tool, but also their implementation experience, the upgrade paths, ease of deployment. vendor performance and response, support capability. And remember that the vendor will have chosen reference sites for you that will tell a good story. So it's important to ask the hard questions to try and uncover any issues that may have arisen with the product or the vendor. But in addition to the provided references, it's good to ask for input from the wider community. So use your community chest. Talk to any other customers of the technology that you're looking at. Consult experts in the field, such as industry analysts and consultants. Browse the internet and social media channels to see what's being said about particular tools and vendors. Ask questions in social media forums about the tools that you're considering. So solicit as much feedback as you can get. Presentations. Presentations from shortlisted vendors are important activities to not only allow stakeholders to see the product in action, but also ask questions of the vendor. It's a good opportunity to meet some of their consultants who could be working on the project and ascertain whether they will be a good fit with your organisation. You may wish to run a number of presentations so all of your key stakeholders can attend. This could include IT staff as well as management and business, and ask the vendor to look to demonstrate integration where that's needed for you as well. Manage expectations is important. When vendors present new tools to stakeholders, they're going to see a very slick and clean tool with great graphics and icons, clever web and email interfaces, and a range of tool-provided efficiencies and automations. Your stakeholders may come away from these presentations with elevated expectations on what they're going to get and when, and how easy it's all going to be. However, the vendors will generally have a very limited view of your state. So you need to set clear and realistic expectations about what they were going to see day one. You may not be turning on all of those features on the first day. You may not have the processes to support them. So it's very much about, when you're moving from one tool to another, transition and then transform. So you need to make sure everybody understands that. What process will be re-engineered and when. So that's a critical part of the organisational change component of a migration, which I'll mention shortly. And pilot. Before you commit to making a purchase, ask the vendor to undertake a pilot or a proof of concept. Don't just rely on a roll of the dice. Choose one or two of the processes that's most important to you and pilot them. Provide the vendor with the process flows and procedural documentation that reflect the way in which the process works in your organisation, and ask them to demonstrate how they'll implement that within the tool. If there are integration requirements that you need, incorporate those into the pilot. And most vendors will be more than happy to commit to this. They may charge for some professional services, but it's going to be better to have outlaid that small cost rather than the cost of a total implementation that's going to fail. If the vendor refuses to undertake a pilot, this should set off some alarm bells. It could be that the tool would need so much customization to meet your needs that the vendor does not want to expose that in a pilot. And if you select the tool, the vendor will often take off the cost of the pilot off your purchase price. So, once you've made the final decision, you can go ahead and make your purchase. You're going to have the opportunity to bargain with the vendor, of course. So be prepared to negotiate on price. And if you have access to people skilled in procurement and negotiation and sourcing, you may ask them to do that on your behalf. If you've undertaken the careful planning and preparation to get to this point, you will have chosen an IT service management solution that's going to deliver a return on investment. So just before I end or start to wrap up this presentation, I want to end on a final important note. And those of you that may know me will not be surprised. Probably the most overlooked aspect of IT service management tool replacement is the people component, and the reason so many initiatives have failed to deliver on stated goals and objectives. Getting buy-in for the change is critical. The new tool is going to change the way in which people work and may also have an impact on their current roles and responsibilities. The new tool must not be seen as a change driven purely by IT, but one that has commitment from the highest levels in the organization. Senior and middle management need to be equipped with the business case for the change and enabled to help transition their staff through the change. Senior management commitment helps to convey the importance of this change. The change in IT service management tool needs to be tied to the organization's mission and objectives. If it cannot be tied to the organization's mission and objectives, the reason for the replacement should be questioned. Communication is critical. It's easier for people to feel a part of the change if they know what's going on and why. Good communication is always important, but even more so when undertaking a change initiative like this. Communication must start early, be frequent, and flow in all directions. Management need to be equipped with the right messages to address staff concerns, and staff need a communication channel to be able to communicate with management, the leaders of the change, and amongst themselves. The reason for the change should be communicated from the highest levels of senior management, that is your executive sponsor. Middle management should communicate what the impact of the change is on staff, their roles and responsibilities and ways of working, as well as the benefits they're going to gain from the change. Communication has to be tailored for each group that's going to be impacted. Business users will need to know what the impact will be to them, what training they're going to receive, and the benefits they'll realise. Technical support staff need to understand what the impact will be on them, the training they're going to receive to support and use the new solution, and the benefits will bring to them. It's important to involve and empower staff so they do not feel that the change is being thrust upon them. Their feedback should be encouraged and responded to, and ideas should be solicited in regards to the replacement process, training requirements, and process improvements. So, to summarise, make sure you're thinking about IT service management tool migration for the right reasons, not just as an excuse for poor processes and poor implementation of those processes. Engage all your stakeholders, make sure everyone's engaged and gathered their requirements. You don't want to miss anything. And careful selection is important. You need to get the right solution that meets your business requirements now and into the future. Get the right vendor for an ongoing relationship. Careful planning and preparation for the implementation and migration is crucial. Take the opportunity for process improvement. Remember, poor processes in the old solution are going to be poor processes in the new solution. And don't forget the organizational change implications of your migration. Make sure everyone's on board and equipped to make the transition. So, if you still plan to just roll the Monopoly dice and play a game of chance, then this is your deserved destiny. Go directly to jail, do not pass go, and do not collect 200. So there are my details. If anyone wants to contact me, I'd love to hear any feedback on the presentation. So that's TFT14 signing off for now. As I said, please contact me if you've got any questions about the presentation or want to give me any feedback. That was great. I hope you've enjoyed all of TFT14, whether you've been watching live or you're going to watch later in the days, weeks and months to follow. Thank you.